My name is Kerry. I am the DARPL Culture, Heritage and Sport practitioner, and I will be facilitating our e-learning discussions today. We're going to be exploring how culture and heritage organisations can equitably operate via co-creation and co-production. We'll be setting the scene by looking at the culture and heritage anti-racism landscape as it currently stands. We'll consider the challenges and the opportunities we face. Next, to ensure we're all speaking the same language, we'll clarify some useful terminology related to anti-racism within this context. Then we'll delve into the power of collaboration by exploring the benefits of co-creation and co-production and look at why working together is so crucial. Following that, we'll outline the process of co-creation and co-production, providing a useful framework for how we can effectively involve stakeholders in developing and implementing anti-racism initiatives. We'll also consider what getting it right looks like. What are the tangible outcomes and characteristics of a truly inclusive and anti-racist organisation, programme or event? To encourage some reflection, we'll have a brief reflective task to consider some of the ideas in more detail. And finally, we'll conclude with some key takeaways to summarise the main points we've discussed. So let's begin by looking at the landscape with an Arwat policy lens, focusing on several key areas for action from identified current inequalities in the sector. Firstly, we must enhance leadership accountability for equity. This means ensuring that leadership within our cultural and heritage institutions takes direct responsibility for promoting anti-racism, actively working to dismantle discriminatory practices. This includes setting clear targets, monitoring progress, and holding individuals and organisations accountable for achieving a more inclusive environment. Secondly, we need to ensure equitable distribution of funding across diverse culture and heritage organisations. We must examine how funding is allocated within the cultural sector in Wales and actively work to ensure that resources are distributed equitably, supporting a diverse range of organisations and initiatives that reflect the rich cultural tapestry of our nation. So, for example, at DARPL, 86% of the staffing, contractors and collaborators are those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. So we work to ensure that the money that we are given goes back into the community. Thirdly, we must reframe historical narratives to acknowledge and address racialized injustices. Our cultural and heritage institutions have a vital role in interpreting and presenting history. We need to critically examine historical narratives, acknowledge past and present injustices, and ensure that diverse perspectives are included in the stories we tell and share. We must embrace cultural diversity and promote understanding of various traditions. Actively celebrating the diverse culture and traditions within Wales is essential. This involves showcasing the contributions of all communities and fostering a deep understanding and appreciation of different cultures and heritage. And finally, we need to promote cultural learning and collaboration. Creating opportunities from different communities can help to break down barriers, challenge stereotypes, and build a more inclusive and understanding society. Moving from the landscape to useful terminology. We have previously discussed terminology in our first introductory session, so please revisit this or view the session if you want to refresh your understanding and knowledge around specific terms. But today we're going to look at the terms lived and living experience of racism. So at DARPL, we state that lived experiences of racism encompasses the various forms of discrimination, prejudice, and systematic barriers that individuals from marginalised or racialised ethnic groups encounter in their daily lives. These experiences can include overt racism, covert racism, institutional systemic racism, and internalised racism as well. In contrast, lived and living experiences of anti-racism encompasses the personal journeys, actions and commitments of individuals who actively work to dismantle racism and promote racial equity. These experiences can include personal transformation, community collective action, allyship and intersectional advocacy. For today's session, it's useful to clarify a few more terms. We have co-creation. Co-creation at its heart is about when individuals and communities actively participate in producing ideas. Think of it as a shared creative process where different perspectives come together. It involves shared decision making and can be strategic in nature. Essentially, co-creation is often a crucial step towards co-production, laying the groundwork for a more in-depth collaboration. It's about bringing key people to the table early on to generate ideas and shape the direction of initiatives. This is about valuing the input and perspectives of a wide range of stakeholders within our communities here in Wales. Now, let's move on to the related concept of co-production. Co-production is a particularly powerful form of collaboration. It's a collaborative process, specifically when working with people who have lived or living experiences of the service or policy in question, rather just than any citizen. This means actively involving those who have first-hand experience of the issues we're trying to address. In our case, the realities of racism within culture and heritage. The goal of co-production is to develop new services, experiences, programs, or initiatives that are truly relevant, effective, and meet the needs of those who are most effective. It's about moving beyond simply consulting and truly partnering with individuals who have lived experience to create solutions together. I really encourage you to check out and join the Co-Production Network for Wales, who offer briefings, training sessions, themed events, and a connection platform for shared practice and a collective voice that can influence policy and decision making nationally. Co-production and co-creation approaches shift the traditional power dynamic, moving from a top-down model to a collaborative, community-driven one. We start at joint visioning. Through open dialogue and collaboration, we establish shared goals and objectives. This ensures everyone involved has a common understanding and direction. It's about asking, what do we want to achieve together, and building a vision that reflects the needs and aspirations of the community. Collective action moves beyond planning to the doing. Stakeholders actively participate in the development and implementation of solutions. This could involve anything from designing exhibitions to leading workshops, conducting oral history projects, or even shaping policy decisions. It's about empowering people to take ownership and contribute their unique skills and perspectives. On to resource sharing. Co-creation leverages the expertise, knowledge, and resources from different stakeholders. This can include anything from local knowledge and lived experiences to academic expertise, financial support, and practical skills. By pooling our resources, we can achieve far greater impact and efficiency than working in isolation. Essentially, co-production and co-creation are about building genuine partnerships, fostering trust, and creating cultural experiences that are truly relevant and meaningful to the communities they serve. For further insights and best practices, I super highly recommend exploring the resources available from organisations like the Museum Association, the National Museum of Wales Charter for Decolonising Collections, People's Collection Wales, and the National Art Collection too. So, who do you think benefits from co-creation and co-production? Firstly, we see clear benefits for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. Through co-creation and co-production, individuals gain a genuine sense of ownership and control over decisions that directly impact their cultural experiences, achieving increased and accurate representation, ensuring that lived and living experiences are actively considered in the creation and preservation of heritage. This leads to improved experiences, as contributions to the development of exhibitions, programs, and resources are more relevant, inclusive, and truly tailored to the needs and interests of those in the community. Furthermore, participation fosters skill development, providing valuable opportunities to gain new skills and knowledge through active involvement in the co-creation process. Secondly, culture and heritage organisations themselves stand to gain significantly. By embracing this collective approach, they benefit from improved decision-making, drawing upon the diverse perspectives and insights of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, leading to more informed and effective decisions. They also achieve increased relevance, developing programs and initiatives that are more relevant and appealing to diverse communities within their locality and beyond. This in turn can lead to enhanced reputation as an inclusive and equitable organisation, fostering trust and attracting a wider range of participants and supporters. Moreover, they can tap into the innovation and creativity of communities to develop new and exciting programs and initiatives that might not have been conceived through a more traditional approach. And finally, the wider community reaps the rewards. Co-creation and co-production promotes increased diversity and inclusion. inclusion, creating a more welcoming and equitable cultural landscape for all members of the community here in Wales. The collaborative work leads to enhanced community relations, building stronger relationships between the cultural organisation and the surrounding communities. Ultimately, this contributes to improved community well-being. Now let's delve into the shared benefits that arise. These advantages extend far beyond individual stakeholders and create a ripple effect of positive outcomes for everyone involved. At Dartpool, we call it the cascade effect. So firstly, we get improved decisions. By incorporating different perspectives and lived experiences, co-creation leads to more informed and effective decision-making processes. This ensures cultural and heritage initiatives are truly responsive to the needs and interests of the communities they serve. We then get increased trust. So when communities feel heard and valued, trust is built between them and cultural institutions, fostering stronger relationships and encouraging ongoing collaboration and engagement. We have greater output, impact and outcomes by leveraging the collective strengths and resources of all stakeholders. Co-creation can lead to more impactful and sustainable outcomes. This could manifest in the form of innovative exhibitions, engaging public programmes, or the successful preservation of important cultural heritage sites. We gain a sense of belonging for all when individuals feel connected to their cultural heritage and have a voice in shaping how it is presented and interpreted, developing a stronger sense of belonging and identity. We have increased community collaboration and social capital, as co-creation fosters a culture of collaborative collaboration and strengthens social bonds within communities. This can lead to the development of new networks, partnerships, and a greater sense of collective efficacy. This leads to genuine empowerment and ownership of services by citizens. By actively involving community members in the design and delivery of cultural services, we empower others to take ownership and shape their own cultural experiences. Broadly, we've got an improved health and well-being through participation, as we know engaging in cultural activities and feeling connected to one's heritage has been shown to have positive impacts on mental and emotional well-being. Finally, there are more relevant and effective services and experiences tailored to the communities. By working closely with communities, cultural organisations can develop services and experiences that are truly relevant, accessible and meaningful. You might already be thinking, I kind of had a general idea anyway about co-creation and co-production, and I understood some of the benefits, to start off with, but actually why I'm engaging with this e-learning module is because I need to know how to do it, and it can be really, really helpful to utilise quite a structured approach and produce a framework to support you, almost like a roadmap that provides guidance and structure to ensure that the efforts are focused, inclusive and successful. I selected this example of a development of a charter for equitable and inclusive co-creation by Mulvale and colleagues from the BMJ Open Medical Journal, and it highlights the importance of having a clear set of guiding principles. I liked how it was split into sections, had quite clear points for each subsection as well. A well-defined framework typically outlines the key stages and considerations involved of a co-creation or co-production process. It can help initiate the process in a clear and purposeful way. It can ensure we have a shared understanding of the goals from the outset, and it can guide us on how to work with stakeholders effectively and ensure that voices are heard and valued throughout the processes. The framework can provide a structure for the creation phase, helping generate ideas, develop solutions collaboratively, and offers tools and methodologies to facilitate the shared creative process. It can guide us through the implementation stage and ensure that the co-created solutions are put into practice in a considered and effective manner. And a good framework will emphasise the importance of evaluation, allowing us to assess the impact of collaborative efforts and learn for future initiatives. By adopting a framework, we can avoid potential pitfalls, we can ensure a more equitable and transparent process, and ultimately increase the likelihood of achieving meaningful and sustainable outcomes in our anti-racist work. And it's important to say that there isn't one single magic framework, that the key is to choose or adapt an approach that suits your specific needs, the context of your organisation, and that a framework is peer-reviewed, collaborated with community members. So overall, we want to have a framework with core principles, have clear steps, are inclusive, and a focus on shared ownership. Following this, you might decide to adopt the framework method, or you could do something similar with a process plan. For example, at DARPL, we have an anti-racist peer review process, so everything that we produce gets checked from an anti-racist lens and is peer reviewed by members of the global majority community. But we work collaboratively to come up with that process. However, even when we have frameworks and co-production ideals, the implementation may not be as successful from an anti-racist perspective as we would like to think. I want to share some critical insights from this recent report, which focuses on the lived experiences of individuals from racialized backgrounds. It offers quite a stark but important perspective on the realities of collaboration. The findings highlight several key areas that we need to be acutely aware of as we strive to implement effective co-creation and co-production initiatives within our organisations. Firstly, the report found that pervasive racism is a significant issue. It ranges from subtle microaggressions to more overt forms of discrimination within these collaborative spaces. Alarmingly, there's often a fundamental lack of understanding of systematic racism and white privilege, which hinders meaningful progress. Secondly, the report revealed the presence of fear and gaslighting. Individuals often experience fear in calling out racist behaviours due to potential negative repercussions, including being gaslighted or labelled as difficult or toxic. And it's this fear that unfortunately silences marginalised voices and perpetuates a cycle of harm. Thirdly, the report points to the instances of tokenism and a lack of action. Co-production spaces sometimes engage in tokenism, including racialised individuals for the sake of appearance rather than providing genuine opportunities for meaningful contributions. Furthermore, there's often a gap between discussing anti-racism and taking concrete action, with some organisations experiencing what the report terms decision paralysis. The report strongly emphasises the need for systematic change. It argues that anti-racism efforts must move beyond individual level training and actively address systemic issues and institutional white supremacy. The report calls for equitable compensation, resources and support for racialised individuals involved in co-production, recognising the value of the lived experience and the emotional labour involved. And at DARPL, I've previously mentioned that we have peer review. It's really important for us with the things that we do, and the majority of peer review that occurs is from collaborators or contributors or contractors, so we're actually paying for that level of peer review. And the non-paid peer review that happens is through networks on a volunteer basis. So the opportunities that we provide are equitable and a choice. The importance of safe spaces in the report is also highlighted. Creating safe and supportive environments where racialised individuals can share their experiences without fear is really, really important. The report suggests the value of sense-making workshops and affinity spaces for processing trauma and fostering meaningful dialogue. The project gathered 37 stories through dialogue interviews and employed methods like story curation and mobilisation to analyse the data and identify key themes. So it's quite important to understand the methodology behind the findings. It's called a community reporting methodology. It's a qualitative approach that centres on lived experiences through peer-to-peer dialogue interviews. If you want to go on and explore how we measure success in anti-racism, we have a further online learning for you to engage with, but this report in particular would be quite interesting for you to take a look at to see how that they've come to their conclusions. The key recommendations for the report were to always acknowledge and address racism as a systemic issue within co-creation. Secondly, is to create safe and supportive environments for racialized individuals. Thirdly, we need to ensure equitable compensation and resources for contributions. Fourthly, to move from rhetoric to concrete action and systemic change. And finally, we need to implement ongoing anti-racism professional learning. Overall, the report underscores the urgent need for co-production spaces to actively dismantle racist structures and practices and to create equitable environments within our culture and heritage practices in Wales. So let's turn our attention on the how, a practical approach in making this a reality. Implementing effective co-creation and co-production requires a structured and thoughtful process. Today we'll outline some key steps to guide our collaborative efforts. Firstly, it starts with identifying key stakeholders and their needs and barriers. Secondly, we need to build trust and relationships. As co-creation thrives on trusts, then we must collaboratively establish goals and objectives. It's crucial that we don't impose goals, but rather work together to define what we want to achieve through our collaborative efforts into tackling racism. We need effective communication and engagement. We need open and honest and accessible communication throughout the entire process, and we need an opportunity-rich supportive environment. We must actively cultivate spaces and processes that are welcoming, inclusive, and we need to provide genuine opportunities for participation and contribution from all. So how do we do it then? How do we identify key stakeholders? Some of you may be familiar with some of these techniques. You might have done it in other areas of your role. Some of you might have only done one or two or none at all. So to identify key stakeholders, we have several different ways we can do this. Stakeholders themselves are the individuals and groups who have a vested interest in what you are doing. Understanding who your stakeholders are, their needs and barriers is fundamental to building inclusive and impactful collaborations. And we can use many different methods to effectively identify these key partners. So firstly, brainstorming and SWOT analysis. Internally, you can gather key personnel within your organizations to brainstorm potential stakeholders. Simultaneously, you could conduct a SWOT analysis looking at the strengths, weaknesses and opportunities and threats to help identify both internal and external factors that affect your organisation and, importantly, the individuals impacted by those factors. Secondly, you could do some stakeholder mapping. Tools like the power interest grid are invaluable here. They can help us categorise stakeholders based on their level of power and their interest in our work. This method I did for DARPL itself, and it was really useful to do and helped even plan communications as well. Those with high power and high interest are our key influencers and require close and proactive engagement. Stakeholders with high power but low interest need to be monitored and occasionally engaged, and those with low power but high interest should be kept informed and their concerns addressed, and those with low power and low interest require minimal engagement. So in the term of what we're talking about today, we have to, in our heads, strip back our own perceptions of power and interest. So it's an activity. The stakeholder mapping is a reflective activity where you need to address your affinity bias within that as well. Most of us will be familiar with surveys and questionnaires. You can gather valuable perspectives by distributing surveys to a wide range of individuals to understand views on the organisation and its stakeholders. Focus groups with key stakeholder groups can also provide deeper, more nuanced insights. You've then got media monitoring and social media analysis. By tracking media coverage of our organisations, we can identify key stakeholders and understand their concerns as they're publicly discussed. Or you can even get monitoring social media platforms to help us identify key individuals, gauge public opinions and understand the levels of engagement. You'll see that I've popped in a link here to an article by Sprout Social. Now, Sprout Social and other platforms are available. Do social media analysis for you. So if you pay for this service, again, it needs to be thought of within your resources. They can identify different trends for you from the socials. You've then got network analysis, where you map out relationships between different stakeholders to identify key connections and influences within the networks. Leveraging these existing networks and relationships can help us identify and engage with new stakeholders we might not have considered initially. And this is really, really where a community of practice can grow. You can identify those pockets and those links and explore that further. It's that knock-on effect of relationships developing and broadening. Then you've got stakeholder workshops. So directly involving stakeholders through workshops provides valuable opportunity to discuss interests, concerns, and expectations firsthand. Also allows for co-creation from the very beginning, involving stakeholders in shaping solutions and strategies. As you undertake this process, do remember a few key things. Be inclusive, not tokenistic. Ensure all relevant stakeholders, particularly those from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, and that's including Romani, Gypsy, Roma travellers and those from different faiths, are identified and considered. You can use census data to understand your local, regional and national context. Be flexible. The process of identifying stakeholders is ongoing and should be adapted as our understanding evolves, as our environment changes. Even changes in the local area, for example, can affect different things. You also have to be transparent. Be open and transparent with stakeholders about how their input is being used and how it's shaping your work. Think about resources, budget and capacity when selecting your methods. What can you realistically do? What have you got the finance and the budget for? What can you prioritize? If you're not a budget holder, but you're working with the budget holder, can you influence them in any way to invest in this area? Cost and price it up, put a plan together, and see what you can do. So we have now identified our stakeholders. We can now look at their barriers and needs. If we think about it, culture and heritage organisations are custodians of our collective stories, entrusted with the preservation and dissemination of diverse narratives that shape our understanding of the world. Yet, the very essence of cultural preservation demands a critical self-examination. Are we truly reflecting the richness and complexity of our communities? The answer often reveals a persistent gap in inclusivity and equity, particularly for Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals and communities. The challenges are multifaceted. Historically, racialized perspectives have been marginalized in curatorial decisions, exhibitions and programming, leading to a skewed representation of our shared heritage. Affinity bias can subtly or overtly taint the interpretation of historical narratives and cultural artifacts, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and reinforcing existing inequalities. This is compounded by the persistent underrepresentation of Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals in leadership roles, curatorial positions and on the boards that guide our cultural institutions. Cultural barriers such as language differences and lack of cultural sensitivity outreach further impede meaningful engagement. And let us not forget the insidious presence of discrimination and prejudice manifested in racial bias, microaggressions and systemic racism, which can cast a shadow over organisational spaces. Finally, unequal access to funding, training and professional development opportunities leaves many talented artists, researchers and cultural practitioners on the periphery. However, recognising these challenges is the first step towards meaningful change. To forge a more equitable future, we must prioritise building trust and building genuine relationships with communities. This entails investing in establishing open communication channels, actively listening to perspectives, ensuring transparency in decision making, and involving community members in collaborative projects and advisory roles. Creating a supportive environment is equally required. We must invest in diversity, inclusion and cultural sensitivity training for staff and volunteers, develop mentorship programs for emerging Black, Asian and minority ethnic professionals, create leadership opportunities and allocate resources to support community-led cultural initiatives. Effective communication is at the heart of this transformation. Clear and accessible communication channels, regular feedback mechanisms, and culturally sensitive outreach are required. We must engage with the wider community to understand needs and interests, ensuring their voices are reflected in programmes and exhibitions. Measuring the impact of our efforts is required. We must establish clear metrics, conduct regular evaluations, collect data on participation and satisfaction, and use feedback for continuous improvements. Addressing systemic exclusion requires bold action. We must implement policy changes to ensure inclusive practices, hold our organisations accountable for promoting equity, and mandate diversity and inclusion training for all. Combating bias in interpretation demands training, mentorship programs for professionals, and highlighting the contributions of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic individuals. We need to increase representation in leadership. We need inclusive recruitment and hiring practices. We need funding and support for professionals. We need to elevate the visibility of global majority artists and leaders. Overcoming cultural barriers involves cultural sensitivity training, culturally appropriate programs, and strong community relationships. Ensuring access to resources means providing financial assistance and funding, equitable access to spaces and collections, and training opportunities. We also need to address microaggressions with zero tolerance policies, safe reporting spaces, bystander intervention training, and disciplinary actions. Moving on to building trusts and relationships. We are going to move away from a traditional provider-recipient dynamic towards genuine partnership. So trust and respect are non-negotiable. This means consistently demonstrating that all individuals' perspectives are valued. It requires creating a safe space where people feel comfortable expressing themselves without fear of judgment. And respect extends to acknowledging cultural differences and honouring diverse traditions. Actions speak louder than words. Consistently following through on commitments and being transparent in your actions builds a solid ground of trust. I often speak to different people, and typically white British or white Welsh people who in really safe and honest spaces say that they themselves feel awkward approaching community members or feel uncomfortable approaching community members. And I think then if that is you and you're feeling that you empathize with that position, have a look at your own affinity biases and think, what's that about? Why do you feel that way? And is actually the first step that you need to do is that deep reflection on yourself to be able to break down the barriers that you may be putting on yourself, if that makes sense. So have a think about what might be stopping you approaching different people or organisations. If we move then on to active listening, it goes beyond simply hearing words. It involves truly understanding the speaker's message, both verbal and non-verbal, which includes paying close attention, asking questions, and reflecting back what you've heard to ensure accurate comprehension. It's important to put your own biases and preconceived notions truly to bed and to the side to try and understand the other person's point of view as well. Meaningful representation ensures that diverse voices are present and influential in all aspects of cultural and heritage work. This includes representation in decision-making, bodies, programme development, and public-facing initiatives. It's vital that the people that the organisation is trying to serve or are trying to serve see themselves reflected in the organisation itself. Representation cannot be tokenistic. It should be about ensuring that diverse communities have real influence. And I'm not sure if any of you have ever been in a conversation with someone who's getting marketing materials together or something, and they can say, oh, make sure that person's in it or that person's in it just because of the colour of their skin. That's tokenistic. It's not genuine. So again, it's a point of reflection of what are you capturing and why. Shared decision making empowers communities to have a genuine stake in the cultural and heritage initiatives that affect them. This involves creating collaborative processes where everyone's input is valued and considered. This approach moves away from a top-down model and towards a partnership-based approach where decisions are made together. And I think it's important to point out here that shared decision making can sometimes be trickier from a from a practical organisational perspective than just maybe one person or two people making a decision. It is not easy to organise a group of people to get together to make a decision. It is not necessarily easy to come to a collective decision on something. But in this line of work, it is not about what is doing what is most easy. It is about what's doing what is most right. And we have to invest and allow for time for this collaborative process and build that in our planning. Culturally responsive practice involves adapting organisational practices and approaches to reflect the diverse cultural backgrounds of the community served. This requires ongoing learning, self-reflection, and a willingness to challenge existing assumptions. It's about creating a cultural environment that is inclusive, welcoming, and respectful of all cultural identities. It's about the organisation adapting and not the community adapting to the organisation. So brilliant. You're now starting to build trust and relationships. You've put in some meetings with different people. You're spending more time together. You've met and had maybe informal chats to start off with in neutral spaces. You've gone on and visited organisations or gone into the community. You're building that trust. Okay. Now you can move towards collaborating and collaboratively establishing clear goals and objectives for your anti-racism work. It is not about imposing predetermined targets, but about working together to define what success looks like and what we aim to achieve collectively. This process begins with joint visioning. We need to create the time and space for all stakeholders to come together, articulate their aspirations for an inclusive and anti-racist environment. This requires open dialogue, active listening, and a willingness to understand different perspectives on what we want to achieve. Through this joint visioning, we work towards a shared vision. This shared vision becomes our guide, a common understanding of our desired future. It's a collective statement that unites us around a common purpose and provides clear direction for our efforts. And I really think with joint visioning and shared vision and common purpose, it's good to align these to your organisational values if you have them, and then your anti-racist position is in line with your organisational values. And I mean, some of the topics we explore actually talk about putting anti-racism as one of your core values as well. If we look at, say, an example of developing a culturally responsive policies instead of generic policies, a collaborative approach would involve joint visioning sessions with and led by Black, Asian and minority ethnic members, community leaders and other stakeholders. And in these sessions, we'd create the necessary time and space for open conversation about existing policies, asking questions like, do these policies truly reflect the need and experience of everyone in our community here in, for example, say Pembrokeshire? That's where I'm from. Are there any cultural insensitivities or biases embedded within them? Through this joint visioning, we would collectively articulate a shared vision for what truly inclusive and culturally responsive policy should look like, and this might involve identifying specific cultural considerations, ensuring language, accessibility, or adapting processes to better reflect diverse cultural practices. So, by collectively establishing these goals and objectives grounded in a shared vision, we can ensure that our anti-racism initiatives are relevant, meaningful, and have the full support and ownership of the communities they are intended to serve. So, for example, I mentioned I'm from Pembrokeshire. Where I grew up, there were different communities of Romani, Gypsy, Roma travellers, and it was really important from I'm thinking here with an education lens that policies reflected the requirements of those groups to enable their participation and enable equal opportunities in terms of education, and it really shaped, having involvement from the communities themselves really shaped what that pathway looked like. So how are you communicating already within any existing co-production or co-creation practices that you are implementing at the moment? Or in fact, how do you communicate in general as a team, as an organisation? Because you may be doing some of the following things already, which means you can adapt your current practice and fit it in line with the co-production and co-creation process. It's about putting our collaborative vision into practice. Working together, stakeholders actively participate in the development and implementation of solutions via collective action, which is moving beyond simply discussing ideas and actively shaping and putting our anti-racism strategies into action sharing. This can involve resource sharing, leveraging the expertise, knowledges and resources from different stakeholders, leading to greater efficiency and a more impactful approach. It can involve community groups sharing their cultural understanding, museum and galleries providing facilities, or individuals offering their lived experiences to inform our work. In terms of open communication, we need to create and maintain open and transparent communication channels that facilitate ongoing dialogue and provide opportunities to feedback from all stakeholders. This ensures information flows freely and everyone feels informed about progress and challenges. We must also prioritise voice and representation. Empowering all members of our community to express their perspectives, needs and concerns is required. So we need to actively seek out and value a range of viewpoints and ensure that everyone feels valued. It's about establishing, going back to our network that we looked at the start, network mapping. How can we use that and use different communication tools to have a greater reach? Working with local communities is also required. Involving local communities in the planning and implementation of programs increases ownership and sustainability. Community-led initiatives provide valuable opportunities for local residents to shape their own experiences, ensuring that our efforts are truly relevant and rooted in the needs of the people. Empowering local communities to develop their own infrastructures, events and resources fosters a strong sense of pride and belonging, making our anti-racism work more deeply embedded within the fabric of our communities. We must create an opportunity-rich, supportive environment. This means actively fostering spaces and processes that are welcoming and provide genuine opportunities for participation and contribution from all members of our community. One way we can achieve this is by leveraging technology. Online platforms can facilitate collaboration and knowledge sharing, connecting people across our Welsh landscape. Digital tools can streamline processes and enable more efficient communication, making it easier for everyone to engage. Furthermore, data analysis can play a vital role in informing our decision-making and tracking the impact of our co-creation initiatives, ensuring we are making progress and adapting where necessary. This environment must be characterised by collaborative decision-making. This means actively involving and/or recruiting Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals in the planning, implementation and evaluating of our initiatives, programmes and organisations, ensuring perspectives are central to the process and that decisions are truly representative. We must also think about capacity building, involving providing targeted training and resources to support global majority staff and volunteers within our organisations. Investing in their skills and development empowers individuals and strengthens our collective ability to drive change. We could offer mentorship and training opportunities for leaders across all levels to help nurture talent and build more diverse and inclusive leadership base, and develop a leadership pipeline, actively identifying and nurturing talent across all levels of the organisation, ensuring there are clear pathways for individuals from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds to progress and take on leadership roles. This proactive approach ensures long-term representation and a truly inclusive leadership structure here in Wales. Our commitment doesn't end with implementation, it's an ongoing journey of learning and improvement. So our final key step is to continuously measure impact, evaluate and adapt to ensure our anti-racism efforts remain effective and relevant. We've discussed previously that this process can be guided by a framework. Having a clear framework for our co-creation and production initiatives provides a structure for how we measure success and identify areas for improvement. It can also help us to track progress against our collaboratively established goals and objectives. Regular consultation with stakeholders is required. Constantly seek feedback from all involved to understand what's working well, what challenges remain, and how our programs and organisations can be improved. This ongoing dialogue ensures that our efforts remain aligned with the lived experiences and needs of the community. We need clear accountability. We need to define who is responsible for implementing and monitoring our anti-racism initiatives and ensure that there are clear mechanisms for accountability within our organisations. This fosters a sense of responsibility and commitment to achieving our goals. We need regular reviews where we periodically assess the effectiveness of our strategies, identify any unintended consequences, and critically evaluate whether we're achieving the desired impact in tackling racism. Finally, sustaining our efforts is paramount. We need to build systems and practices that ensure our anti-racism work is not a one-off project, but an integral and ongoing part of the culture and operations of our organisations. This involves embedding these principles into policies, procedures, and long-term strategic plans. By consistently measuring our impact, actively seeking feedback through consultation, ensuring accountability, regularly reviewing our programs, and focusing on sustainability, we can ensure that our co-creation efforts are dynamic, responsive, and ultimately drive meaningful and lasting change. Let's look at Butetown Arts and Culture CIC Carnival as a case study. So they set out with some clear goals to preserve and celebrate the rich cultural heritage of Butetown and Cardiff, to foster inclusivity and cultural exchange within the Cardiff community and beyond, and really to provide a platform and economic opportunities for the residents, and particularly those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. To achieve these aims, they undertook a range of activities demonstrating a deep commitment to co-creation. The annual carnival itself was planned, organised and delivered with significant community input, featuring performances, engagement and inclusive programming. There was Butetown Carnival Archive and an exhibition which documented and preserved the carnival's history through a community-driven archive and public exhibition. A Carnival of Wales tour that took the carnival experience to communities across Wales, showcasing cultural fusion. This included a unique fusion of the Welsh Maori Lwyd tradition with Junkanoo, enhanced with a Brazilian jazz twist, demonstrating cross-cultural co-creation. There were workshops and skills development opportunities where training was provided in event management, performance and costume design, empowering local residents with real skills. There was active community collaboration to ensure participation and really strong partnership building, cultivating relationships with key institutions like Wales Millennium Centre, the Senedd and the Arts Council of Wales. And the success was really evidenced in the tangible outcomes. So there were 3,000 attendees daily at the 2023 Carnival, demonstrating its widespread appeal. There were 150 employed performers, artists and technical staff, providing valuable economic opportunities. 8 performances were completed across various locations in Wales, and 26 people aged 17 to 67 from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities were employed on the project, demonstrating the project's commitment to community employment. There was also the growth of Dathliad Cymru Africa Festival as a spin-off of the Carnival, demonstrating the longer-term cultural impact. The Butetown Carnival serves as a powerful example of how co-creation and co-production can transform a cultural experience and empower local communities, leaving a lasting legacy. And to find out a little bit more about this event and the challenges and how they were overcome, and even how the event links to the ARWAP, please visit the case study section on the platform, because you can find out more there. Another in-depth case study we have in our case study collection is that of St Fagan's National History Museum. St Fagan's perspective shows how museums can operate anti-colonial practice and narratives through co-creation. The project focused on actively involving communities in reinterpreting colonial-linked collections like the Clive sofa. Their key approach was extensive community engagement and critical friend input during the research phase, which led to creative installations that challenged traditional museum narratives. Its impact increased internal awareness among staff about anti-colonial practice, and it generated positive visitor feedback and attracted new audiences and fostered strong community partnerships, like with the Aurora Trinity Collective. The project successfully recontextualised the Clive sofa, promoting critical thinking about its history. It's a model for museums in Wales and beyond, demonstrating the power of co-creation in addressing complex histories. The project proves that by working directly with communities, museums can create more inclusive and honest representations of our shared history. And overall, it's created long-term change in how the museum now approaches collections and colonial legacies. Again, I encourage you to visit the full case study to explore how the museum approached, delivered, and evaluated its work. And this case study in particular is extremely comprehensive, so I would recommend that you go and read it when you've got a chance. So when we get it right, shifting the paradigm from doing to doing with. As we've discussed, the most effective approach in anti-racism is through genuine collaboration. This represents a fundamental shift in how we approach our work. Historically, and perhaps in some instances still today, the approach might be characterised by a doing to or doing for mindset. Sometimes there's a tendency to coerce, to enforce policies or practices without genuine buy-in, or the focus might be on simply trying to educate others. This may be an idea of allyship instead of advocacy, without necessarily involving those most effective in shaping the learning. Alternatively, the approach might involve doing for, simply informing stakeholders about decisions that have already been made, consulting with them in a limited or tokenistic way, or attempting to engage them in activities without truly valuing input in the core design and implementation. While some feel these approaches may have their place, they often lead to limited impact and can fail to address the root cause of systemic issues. The true power lies in moving towards doing with, embracing co-creation and co-production. This signifies a fundamental change in our approach, where we actively involve stakeholders, and particularly those of Black, Asian and minority ethnic members, as equal partners in shaping solutions and driving change. This shift from doing to or doing for to doing with is what increases participation and fosters a genuine sense of ownership and belonging within our communities. It's about valuing lived experiences, sharing decision-making power, and working together to build a truly anti-racist and equitable future. And on the note of co-production and co-creation in general, from a business perspective, there's also some things to consider when we are doing with, and that can be things like payment, intellectual property, terms and conditions. If you're working with any other partner in your organisation that you're paying for services, it's important that you've got those agreements in place. So treat your collaborators, again, that you're paying for, with the respect and same approach as you would if you were negotiating terms and conditions with other people that you are contracting. At the start, talk about what you need and what you require, talk about payment if you're going to do payment, and make sure that you agree that when things are produced, within your terms and conditions, how are those individuals or groups going to be referenced in what you're creating or designing? How are they going to be acknowledged? If there's payment, what does that payment look like? How much? And really go in co-production and co-creation within your organisations, events or programmes with budget in mind, okay? Now, as we move towards the end of our discussion, I'd like to invite you to take some time for a reflective task. Think about your own organisations, your experiences and the context of culture and heritage across Wales. Take a few moments to consider these questions individually, or perhaps discuss them briefly with those around you. This reflection is an important step in translating ideas we've discussed into tangible action. We have resources for you to record your thoughts and encourage you to send them into darpol@cardiffmet.ac.uk and or share with those around you. Here are a few resources you could explore. If you have any resources you would like to share or be linked on the DARPA website, please do get in touch so we can share. Equally, if you'd like to write a blog, such as your top 5 resources for anti-colonial practice, or any topic linked to anti-racism in culture and heritage, let us know, and we're happy to work together to publish helpful content. To conclude, successful co-creation and co-production hinges on 3 key elements: clear goals, ongoing communication, and an unwavering commitment to inclusivity and anti-racism. By embracing these principles, our cultural and heritage organisations can empower stakeholders, foster innovation, and ultimately create lasting positive impacts on the communities we serve. Here are the references from today's e-learning. DARPL encourages you to engage in deeper reading to develop your knowledge and understanding of anti-racism, co-production and co-creation. Thank you so much for your time today, and looking forward to seeing some of the reflective tasks come in the DARPL inbox. Thank you.